When Raffaella arrives at Fazenda Bella Terra, she's only planning to escape heartbreak. But a sick cow, a stormy night, and a reclusive farmer's question, "Do you think you could take care of me too?" change everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun shone over Fazenda Bella Terra as Raffaella Mendez pulled her small, beat-up car through the wooden gates of the farm. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror and sighed. The dark circles under her eyes told the story of too many sleepless nights. Just 6 months, she reminded herself. 6 months to get your life back together. At 25, Rafa hadn't planned on working at a farm in the middle of nowhere, but after finding her boyfriend of 3 years in bed with her roommate and then losing her apartment, she needed an escape. When Maria, a friend from college, mentioned a seasonal job at a farm owned by a friend's cousin, Rafa jumped at the chance. The main house came into view, a large 2-story building with a wide porch and simple white paint. Several workers moved around the property, carrying tools and leading animals. No one seemed to notice her arrival. Rafa parked her car and grabbed her suitcase from the trunk. As she approached the house, a short, plump woman with grey hair spotted her and waved. "You must be Raffaella," the woman called out. "I'm Elena, the housekeeper. We've been expecting you." Rafa forced a smile. "Please, call me Rafa." Elena's warm smile made Rafa feel a bit more at ease. "Come, I'll show you where you'll be staying. The owner, Mr. Brando, is out checking the fields right now, but you'll meet him at dinner." Rafa followed Elena to a small cabin near the main house. It was simple but clean, with a bed, dresser, and tiny bathroom. "It's not much," Elena said, "but it's private." "It's perfect," Rafa replied, and she meant it. After the chaos of the city and her life falling apart, the quiet simplicity felt right. Elena left her to unpack, explaining that dinner would be at 6 in the main house. Rafa sat on the bed and looked around her new home. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. Later that evening, Rafa made her way to the main house for dinner. The large kitchen was filled with workers, all talking and laughing. Elena waved her over to an empty chair. "Everyone, this is Rafa, our new farmhand," Elena announced. The workers greeted her warmly, but Rafa noticed an empty chair at the head of the table. "Where's Mr. Brando?" she asked Elena quietly. Elena's smile faltered. "João often eats in his office. He's not very social these days," Rafa learned. More about the farm as dinner progressed. Fazenda Bella Terra was one of the most successful in the region, known for its dairy production and organic vegetables. The workers spoke of João Brandão with respect, but there was something else in their voices, perhaps pity. "His parents died 3 years ago," whispered Carlos, an older man who managed the dairy operation. "Car accident. João was with them but survived. He hasn't been the same since." Rafa nodded, understanding all too well how loss could change a person. After dinner, Elena showed Rafa around the property and explained her duties. She would be helping with the milking, feeding the animals, and whatever else needed to be done. "The work is hard," Elena warned, "but there's something healing about it, about being close to the animals and the land." Rafa didn't believe her, but she smiled politely anyway. She wasn't here to heal. She was here to hide, to forget, to survive until she could figure out what came next. The next morning, Rafa woke before sunrise. She dressed quickly in jeans and a flannel shirt, pulling her dark hair into a practical ponytail. Elena had mentioned that breakfast started at 5 and she didn't want to be late on her first day. In the kitchen, she grabbed a cup of coffee and a piece of bread. The workers were already heading out to begin their day, and Rafa followed Carlos to the dairy barn. "Start by feeding the calves," Carlos instructed. "Then help Miguel with the milking." The work was indeed hard, but Rafa found herself getting lost in it. There was something satisfying about the simple, necessary tasks. By mid-morning, her muscles ached, but she pushed through. After helping with the milking, Rafa decided to walk through the pasture to check on the cattle. The morning fog was lifting, revealing the rolling green hills that stretched to the horizon. For a moment, she allowed herself to appreciate the beauty of this place. That's when she saw it, a cow lying apart from the herd, trembling despite the warming day. Rafa approached slowly, kneeling beside the animal. The cow's eyes were glassy, and its breathing labored. Without thinking, Rafa placed her hand on the cow's head, feeling the heat radiating from it. The animal had a fever and what looked like swollen joints. No one else seemed to have noticed the sick animal, and Rafa couldn't just leave it suffering. She sat in the mud beside the cow and began gently massaging its swollen legs. "It's okay, girl," she whispered. "I'm here now." Rafa lost track of time. As she cared for the cow, humming softly as she worked, she didn't hear the footsteps approaching until a shadow fell across her. "What are you doing?" The voice was deep and stern. Rafa looked up to see a tall man standing over her. His face was partly hidden by the brim of a worn cowboy hat, but she could make out strong features, a square jaw covered in stubble, intense eyes, and a mouth set in a hard line. "This cow is sick," Rafa explained, not stopping her gentle massage. "She has a fever and swollen joints. She needs medicine and shouldn't be out here alone." The man stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he knelt beside her, his movements careful as he examined the cow. "Rheumatic fever," he said quietly. "We'll need to move her to the barn." Rafa nodded. "I can help." The man looked at her again, this time really seeing her. "You're the new worker, Rafaela." "Rafa," she corrected automatically. "I'm João Brandão. This is my farm." Rafa felt her cheeks flush. Of course, this was the owner, the man everyone talked about in hushed tones. He looked younger than she expected, maybe 30, but his eyes held a weariness that made him seem older. "Nice to meet you," she said, then turned her attention back to the cow. "She's been out here for a while. None of the other workers noticed her." Something flickered across João's face. Disappointment, maybe anger. But he didn't comment on the workers' oversight. "I'll get the truck," he said instead. "We can transport her to the barn." João returned quickly with a small pickup truck. Together, they coaxed the sick cow into the truck bed and drove slowly back to the barn. Rafa sat in the back with the cow, continuing to stroke and comfort it. In the barn, João prepared a stall with fresh hay, while Rafa led the cow inside. He disappeared briefly and returned with medicines and supplies. "Have you done this before?" he asked as he filled a syringe. Rafa shook her head. "But I've always had a way with animals. My grandparents had a small farm when I was little." João nodded and handed her the supplies. "Hold these." He worked efficiently, giving the cow injections and examining her thoroughly. Rafa watched his hands, strong but gentle as they moved over the animal. Despite his reputation for being cold, there was undeniable care in his touch. "She'll need regular treatment for at least a week," João said when he finished. "Antibiotics twice a day and anti-inflammatories for the swelling." "I'll take care of her," Rafa offered immediately. João looked surprised. "That's not part of your job." "I don't mind," Rafa insisted. "I found her. I feel responsible." After a long moment, João nodded. "Fine, but don't neglect your other duties." With that, he gathered his supplies and left the barn, leaving Rafa alone with the cow. She spent another hour making sure the animal was comfortable before returning to her assigned tasks. That evening at dinner, Rafa noticed the workers watching her curiously. Word had spread about her discovery of the sick cow and her interaction with the reclusive owner. "João rarely speaks to new workers," Elena told her later. "He must have been impressed." Rafa shrugged. "I was just doing what needed to be done." After dinner, she returned to the barn to check on the cow. The animal seemed a little better, eating some hay and drinking water. Rafa sat beside it, talking softly as she had earlier. She didn't hear the barn door open, didn't realize she wasn't alone, until a voice spoke from the shadows. "You didn't have to come back tonight." Rafa jumped, turning to see João standing in the doorway. Outside, rain had begun to fall, and his clothes were damp, his hair wet against his forehead. "I wanted to make sure she was comfortable." Rafa explained. João stepped into the barn, shaking water from his hat. "Most people wouldn't care this much about a cow." "She's not just a cow," Rafa said. "She's a living creature who's suffering." Something changed in João's expression, a softening, around his eyes perhaps. He moved closer, kneeling on the other side of the cow. "I named the farm Bela Terra, Beautiful Earth, Because my parents believed everything living deserved care and respect, he said quietly. They would have liked you. The personal admission surprised Rafa. From what she'd heard, João rarely spoke about his parents. I'm sorry about your loss, she said gently. João's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly guarded. Who told you about that? The workers mentioned it, Rafa admitted. I didn't mean to pry. João stood abruptly. It's not important. Just make... Shall you give her the medicine in the morning? He turned to leave, but paused at the door, rain still pouring outside. His broad shoulders seemed to carry an invisible weight, and when he spoke, his voice was so quiet, Rafa almost missed it. If you have that kind of tenderness... He hesitated, his voice breaking slightly. Do you think you could take care of me too? The words hung in the air between them. Before Rafa could respond, João stepped out into the storm, disappearing into the darkness. Rafa sat frozen, wondering if she had imagined those vulnerable words from a man everyone described as closed off and cold. The cow nudged her hand, bringing her back to reality. Did that really just happen? She whispered to the animal. For the next few days, Rafa fell into a routine. She worked with the other farmhands during the day, took special care of her sick cow, whom she'd named Estrela, or Star, and tried to avoid thinking about João's strange question in the barn. She rarely saw the owner. He seemed to be avoiding her, disappearing whenever she entered a room or changing direction when he spotted her in the fields. The few times they did interact, he was all business, asking about Estrela's progress or giving instructions about farm work. But Rafa noticed small changes. One morning she found a thermos of fresh coffee outside her cabin door. Another day, her worn work gloves were replaced with new ones in exactly her size. When a sudden afternoon storm soaked her to the skin, a clean towel and dry clothes appeared. In the barn where she took shelter, she knew these things came from João, though he never mentioned them. It was as if he was trying to care for her in his own quiet way, unable to express it directly. 1 week turned into 2, and Estrela grew stronger under Rafa's care. The other workers began to accept her as part of the team, and even João seemed more comfortable in her presence, though he kept his distance. Helena noticed the change in him. You've done something to our boss, she told Rafa one evening as they prepared dinner. He's different lately, less haunted. I haven't done anything, Rafa protested. Helena gave her a knowing smile. You showed kindness without wanting anything. In return, for someone like João, who's known only loss and obligation for years, that's powerful medicine. Rafa thought about Helena's words as she finished her evening chores. She hadn't come to Fazenda Bela Terra looking for connection. After David's betrayal, she'd sworn off relationships and emotions altogether. She was here to heal herself, not someone else. And yet, as she walked past João's office and saw him working late, his face tired in the lamplight, she couldn't help the surge of warmth she felt. Without thinking, she poured a cup of coffee from the kitchen and brought it to his door. You look like you could use this, she said, setting it on his desk. João looked up, surprised. Thank you. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. There was something unspoken between them, a recognition, perhaps, of two wounded souls. Estrela is much better, Rafa said finally, breaking the silence. She might be able to rejoin the herd soon. João nodded. You did good work with her. We did, Rafa corrected. I couldn't have helped her without your knowledge. A ghost of... A smile touched João's lips. You would have figured it out. You have good instincts. The compliment warmed Rafa more than it should have. She turned to leave, but João's voice stopped her. There's a storm coming tonight, he said. A big one. We'll need to secure the animals and equipment. I'll help, Rafa offered. João's eyes softened. I know you will. The storm hit just after midnight, rain pounding on the roof of Rafa's cabin, and wind howling through the trees. She couldn't sleep, worrying about Estrela and the other animals. Finally, she pulled on her boots and rain jacket and headed for the barn. The path was muddy and slick, the rain coming down in sheets. Rafa could barely see a few feet ahead, but she knew the way by heart now. As she approached the barn, she saw a figure struggling with the heavy door that had blown open in the wind. It was João, soaked and fighting against the storm. Rafa ran to help, pushing against the door until they managed to secure it. Inside, the animals were restless but safe. "What are you doing here?" Juan demanded, water dripping from his face. "I was worried about Estrella," Rafa explained, pushing wet hair from her eyes. Juan's expression changed, the harshness melting away. He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek before dropping back to his side. "You're shivering," he observed. Rafa hadn't noticed, but now she felt the cold seeping into her bones. Juan led her to a small room at the back of the barn where tools and supplies were kept. A portable heater stood in the corner and he turned it on. "Sit," he instructed, pointing to a wooden bench. From a shelf, he pulled down a blanket and handed it to her. Rafa wrapped it around her shoulders gratefully. "Thank you." Juan sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. For a while, they just listened to the storm raging outside and the occasional sounds from the animals. "I haven't thanked you properly," Juan said suddenly. "For Estrella, for noticing what everyone else missed." "You don't need to thank me," Rafa said. "It's what anyone would do." Juan shook his head. "No, it's not. Most people walk past suffering because it's easier. Because getting involved means feeling something." His words hit too close to home. Wasn't that what she had been doing? Running from her feelings? Trying to numb the pain of betrayal? "I know about your ex," Juan said quietly. Elena mentioned. Rafa stiffened. "It's not important." "It is," Juan insisted, "because it's made you afraid, like me." He turned to face her, his eyes intense in the dim light. "I watched you with Estrella. You gave her exactly what she needed without hesitation, but you won't allow yourself the same care." "And you do?" Rafa challenged, suddenly defensive. Juan's laugh was hollow. "No, I've been hiding for 3 years. Burying myself in work, pushing everyone away." He paused. "Until you found a sick cow and showed me what I'd forgotten." "What's that?" Rafa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That healing requires tenderness," Juan said, "and that sometimes the people who give the most care need it the most themselves." The storm outside began to ease, the wind dying down to a gentle patter of rain. In the small room, with only the heater's glow for light, Rafa felt something shift between them, a wall beginning to crumble. "We should check the animals," she said, standing abruptly. The moment felt too intimate, too dangerous. Juan nodded, accepting her retreat. Together they checked on Estrella and the other animals, working in comfortable silence. By the time they finished, the rain had stopped completely and the first light of dawn was breaking through the clouds. At the barn door, they paused. Juan looked down at Rafa, his face softened by the early morning light. "Rest today," he said. "You've earned it." Rafa shook her head. "There's work to be done after the storm." "Always taking care of everything but yourself," Juan observed, a hint of sadness in his voice. "Get some rest, Rafa. That's not a request from your boss. It's a plea from someone who cares." With that, he walked away, leaving Rafa to wonder how this quiet, broken man had seen through her so completely, and why his concern made her heart race with both fear and something dangerously close to hope. 2 weeks had passed since the storm, and life at Fazenda Bella-Terra settled into a comfortable rhythm. Rafa found herself looking forward to each day, surprising herself with how quickly the farm had begun to feel like home. Estrella had fully recovered and rejoined the herd, though she still came running whenever Rafa called. The other workers had taken to calling Rafa the Cow Whisperer, a nickname that made her smile despite herself. On this particular morning, Rafa woke earlier than usual. The sun hadn't yet risen, but she couldn't go back to sleep. Her mind was too full of thoughts, of the farm, of her future, and increasingly of Juan. She dressed and stepped outside her cabin, surprised to see a light on in the main house. Juan was an early riser, but not usually this early. Curious, she made her way across the yard. The kitchen door was unlocked. Inside, she found Juan at the table, papers spread before him, his face creased with worry. "I'm sorry," Rafa said, when he looked up. "I saw the light." Juan waved her in. "Coffee's fresh." Rafa poured herself a cup and sat across from him. "Problems?" Juan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of stress. "The bank loan I was counting on fell through. Without it, I can't afford the new milking equipment we need." Rafa frowned. "I thought the farm was doing well." It is, but farming is expensive. My father took out loans to expand right before... He paused. Before the accident. I've been paying them down, but it leaves little for improvements. It was the most João had ever shared about. His financial situation or his parents. Rafa felt a surge of warmth that he trusted her enough to confide in her. Maybe there's another solution, she suggested. What about selling at the farmer's market in town? Elena says your organic vegetables are the best in the region. João shook his head. We don't have enough staff to manage a market stand. I could do it, Rafa offered without thinking. Before I came here, I worked in retail. I know how to sell things. João looked at her, surprise evident in his eyes. You do that? It's not part of your job. Rafa smiled. Neither was nursing. Castrela, but that turned out okay. For a moment, João's face softened into a genuine smile, transforming his usually serious features. Okay, he agreed. We'll try the market this Saturday. That Saturday, Rafa woke with the sun, excitement bubbling in her chest. João had spent the week helping her prepare, showing her which vegetables to harvest and how to arrange them for display. He'd even fixed up an old truck for transportation and built wooden crates for the produce. When Rafa arrived at the main house, João was waiting with the truck already loaded. He looked different today. He'd trimmed his beard and wore a clean blue shirt instead of his usual work clothes. You look nice, Rafa said before she could stop herself. A faint blush colored João's cheeks. I thought I should make an effort, if we're meeting potential customers. The drive to town was pleasant, with João pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the area. Rafa found herself laughing at his dry humor, a side of him she'd rarely seen. My mother would have liked you, João said suddenly as they approached the town. She always said I needed someone who could make me laugh. The personal admission hung between them, neither acknowledging the implication of his words. The farmer's market was already bustling when they arrived. João helped Rafa set up their stand, arranging the colorful vegetables in attractive displays. As the first customers approached, Rafa felt a nervous flutter. What if no one buys anything? She whispered to João. He squeezed her hand briefly. Then we'll have a lot of salad for dinner. His touch was warm and reassuring, and Rafa found herself wishing he wouldn't let go. But he did, stepping back as she greeted the first customer. To Rafa's delight, the vegetables sold quickly. People were drawn to the quality of Fazenda Bela, Terra's produce, and many asked if they would be returning next week. By noon they had sold almost everything and had a list of people interested in regular deliveries. You were amazing, João said as they packed up the empty crates. I've never seen anyone charm customers like that. Rafa felt her cheeks warm at the praise. It was easy. The products speak for themselves. João shook his head. No, it was you. Your smile, your way with people. You made them feel special. They stopped for lunch at a small cafe in town, celebrating their successful morning. João seemed more relaxed than Rafa had ever seen him, laughing openly and talking about plans for expanding their market presence. We could offer dairy products, too, he suggested. Cheese, yogurt, butter. Elena makes the best cheese in the county. Rafa nodded, caught up in his enthusiasm. And maybe jams or preserves. I know some recipes from my grandmother. João reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. You're full of surprises, Rafaela Mendes. The way he said her full name sent a shiver down her spine. No one had said it like that before, like it was something precious. On the drive home, they talked about everything and nothing, childhood memories, favorite books, dreams they'd once had. For the first time, Rafa told João the full story of her ex-boyfriend's betrayal, how she'd walked in to find him with her roommate. I felt so stupid, she admitted, like I should have known, like I wasn't enough. João's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He's the one who wasn't enough, not you. Back at the farm, as they unloaded the truck, Elena came out to greet them. Her eyes widened at the empty crates. Teu sold everything, she exclaimed. João nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. Thanks to Rafa, we have orders for next week too. Elena looked between them, a knowing smile on her face. Well, isn't that wonderful? João, your father would be so proud to see you bringing the farm back to life like this. That evening after dinner, Rafa found herself restless. The day with João had awakened something in her, a longing she'd thought she'd buried after David's betrayal. She decided to walk to the barn to check on the animals, needing the comfort of their simple presence. To her surprise, she found João there, sitting on a bale of hay, staring into space. He looked up when she entered, and the naked emotion on his face made her heart skip. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting beside him. João was quiet for a long moment. "Today was the first time in 3 years I've felt happy, really happy." He looked at her, his eyes vulnerable. "It scares me." Rafa understood completely. "Because you feel like you don't deserve it." He nodded. "After my parents died, I was driving. It was raining. I should have been more careful." "It was an accident," Rafa said softly. "An accident that took their lives and spared mine," João countered. "Sometimes I think that's my punishment, to live without happiness. Without..." Thinking, Rafa reached for his hand. "That's not how life works, João. Your parents wouldn't want you to punish yourself forever." João looked down at their joined hands. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "See right through me. Know exactly what I need to hear." Rafa smiled sadly. "Maybe because I've been telling myself the same things, that I don't deserve happiness after failing so completely with David." João's free hand moved to her face, his fingers gentle against her cheek. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both afraid of the same things." For a heartbeat, Rafa thought he might kiss her. She found herself wanting it, leaning slightly toward him. But João stood abruptly, breaking the moment. "It's late," he said, his voice gruff. "We should get some rest." Rafa nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Good night, João." As she walked back to her cabin, Rafa scolded herself for the flutter of hope she'd felt. João was her employer, and she was still healing. Getting involved would be a mistake for both of them. But the next morning she found a small pot of wildflowers outside her door, the same ones she'd admired at the market. There was no note, but she knew who had left them. Over the next few weeks, the farmer's market became a regular part of Rafa's routine. Each Saturday she and João would load the truck with produce and head into town. Their stand became popular, with customers lining up to buy Fazenda Bela Terra's products and chat with the friendly saleswoman. With the extra income, João was able to make some of the farm improvements he'd been postponing. He hired 2 more workers and ordered parts to repair the old tractor. The farm seemed to be coming alive again, and João along with it. Rafa noticed the changes in him. He smiled more often, joined the workers for meals, and even organized a bonfire night to celebrate a successful harvest. The workers who had known him before the accident whispered about the transformation. "It's you," Eleanor told Rafa one afternoon as they prepared vegetables for the next market day. "You've brought him back to life." Rafa shook her head. He did that himself. He just needed a reminder that it was possible. But she couldn't deny that something was growing between them. It was in the small moments, the way João's eyes sought her out across a room, how his hand would linger when passing her tools, the private jokes they shared that no one else understood. One evening, João asked Rafa to join him for a walk around the property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They strolled in comfortable silence until they reached a small hill overlooking the farm. "My father proposed to my mother on this spot," João said as they sat on a wooden bench. "He told me it was because from here you can see everything that matters." Rafa looked out at the view. The barns, fields, and pastures spread below them, the workers heading home for the evening, smoke rising from the kitchen chimney. It was beautiful in its simplicity. "I can see why," she said softly. João turned. To her, his eyes serious. "What do you want, Rafa? After your 6 months here are up?" The question caught her off guard. She hadn't thought much about leaving lately. Somehow the farm had become more than just an escape. It had become a place where she felt she belonged. "I don't know," she admitted. "I came here to hide, to lick my wounds. I didn't expect to find something worth staying for," João finished when she trailed off. Rafa met his gaze. "Yes." João took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "I never expected you either. This woman who sees broken things and doesn't walk away, who fixes them instead." I didn't fix you, João, Rafa said. You weren't broken. I was, he countered. I still am in many ways, but you make me want to be whole again. The honesty in his voice made Rafa's heart ache. She had been fighting her feelings for weeks, afraid of being hurt again. But sitting here with João watching the sunset over the land he loved, she couldn't remember why she had been so afraid. I'm scared, she admitted, of feeling too much, of giving someone the power to hurt me again. João nodded. I understand. Fear. I've lived with it for 3 years. He paused. But I'm more afraid of letting you leave without telling you what you've come to mean to me. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. I've watched you with the animals, with the workers, with the land. You give so much care to everything around you, but who takes care of you, Rafa? The question brought unexpected tears to her eyes. No one had asked her that before. She had always been the caretaker, the one others leaned on. I don't need, she began. Everyone needs care, João interrupted gently. Even you, especially you. He reached out, wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Let me try, he whispered. Let me care for you the way you care for everything else. The tenderness in his voice broke something inside Rafa, a wall she had built after David's betrayal. Before she could think better of it, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to João's. The kiss was soft, questioning at first, then deepening as João pulled her closer. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. I've wanted to do that since I found you in the pasture with Estrela, João confessed, his forehead resting against hers. Rafa smiled. That long? João nodded. You were covered in mud. Your hair was a mess and you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. In the growing twilight, they walked back to the farm, hand in hand. At Rafa's cabin, João kissed her once more, a gentle good night that promised more to come. Tomorrow, he said, I want to show you something. Rafa slept better that night than she had in months, a sense of peace settling over her. Whatever was happening between her and João felt right in a way nothing had before. The next morning, João was waiting for her with 2 horses saddled and ready. Can you ride? He asked. Rafa nodded. My grandfather taught me. They rode across the property beyond the fields Rafa knew until they reached a small meadow filled with wildflowers. In the center stood a dilapidated cottage, its windows broken and roof partially collapsed. What is this place? Rafa asked as they dismounted. It was the original farmhouse, João explained. My great-grandfather built it when he first settled here. No one's lived in it for decades. He took her hand, leading her through the overgrown garden to the cottage door. Inside, despite the disrepair, Rafa could see the bones of a charming home, a stone fireplace, built-in bookshelves and large windows that would fill the space with light. Why did you want to show me this? She asked. João looked around, a hint of nervousness in his expression. I've been thinking about restoring, making it a home again, Rafa smiled. It would be beautiful. I thought. João hesitated. I thought maybe you might like to help decide how it should look, what it needs. The implication was clear. He wasn't just showing her a renovation project, he was showing her a future. Their future, if she wanted it. João, Rafa began, not sure what to say. Everything was moving so fast, and yet it felt like they had been heading toward this moment since the day they met. Before she could continue, a shout from outside interrupted them. They stepped onto the porch to see Carlos riding toward them at full gallop. João, he called, pulling his horse to a stop. You need to come back to the farm. There's someone looking for you, a man from the bank. He says it's urgent. João's face hardened. I'll be right there. He turned to Rafa. I'm sorry, we'll continue this conversation later. They rode back quickly, the peaceful mood of the morning shattered. At the main house, a sleek car with city plates was parked in the driveway. A man in an expensive suit stood on the porch, checking his watch impatiently. Mr. Brandão, the man said as João approached. I'm Marcus Oliveira from First National Bank. We need to discuss your loan situation. João's jaw tightened. Let's talk in my office. He shot Rafa an apologetic look before leading the banker inside. Rafa took the horses to the stable, trying not to worry. João had said the farm was doing better now. Surely this was just a routine meeting. But when João emerged from his office an hour later, his face was grim. Rafa, who had been helping Eleanor in the kitchen, knew immediately that something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked when they were alone. João ran a hand through his hair. "The bank is calling in my father's loans, all of them. They're giving me 30 days to pay in full or they'll foreclose." Rafa felt her heart sink. Can they do that? "Apparently there was a clause in the contract," João said bitterly. "If certain improvements weren't made within 5 years, they could demand immediate repayment." "But that's not fair. You've been making the payments," João sighed. "Fair doesn't matter in business, Rafa. I need to find a way to come up with the money." "How much?" Rafa asked. João named a figure that made her gasp. It was far more than the farm could possibly generate in a month, even with their new market success. "There must be something we can do," she insisted. João's eyes were distant, already calculating possibilities. "There might be. My cousin Miguel has been trying to buy part of the farm for years. I've always refused, but now you'd sell part of Fazenda Belterra." Rafa couldn't hide her shock. The farm was João's heritage, his parents' legacy. If it means saving the rest, yes. João's voice was resolute. "I'll call Miguel tonight." Over the next few days, João spent hours on the phone and in meetings. Miguel had agreed to buy the eastern section of the farm, nearly a third of the property, but the paperwork was complicated and time was running out. Rafa tried to help where she could, taking on extra work to free up João's time and continuing their market sales. But João had withdrawn again, throwing himself into saving the farm and pulling away from their budding relationship. The conversation at the cottage remained unfinished, and the tender moments they had shared seemed like a distant dream. Rafa told herself to be patient. João was fighting for his livelihood, for his family's legacy. Once the crisis passed, they would find their way back to each other. But as the deadline approached, João grew more distant. He worked from dawn until well past midnight, often sleeping in his office. When Rafa tried to talk to him, he was distracted, his mind clearly elsewhere. One evening, a week before the bank's deadline, Rafa decided enough was enough. She marched to João's office, determined to break through his self-imposed isolation. She found him at his desk, surrounded by papers, his face haggard from lack of sleep. "This has to stop," she said firmly, closing the door behind her. "You're going to make yourself sick." João looked up, irritation flashing in his eyes. "I don't have time for this, Rafa." "Make time," she insisted. "You haven't slept properly. In days, you're not eating. How are you going to save the farm if you collapse?" João stood, anger replacing the irritation. "What would you have me do? Give up? Let my parents' farm be taken by the bank?" "No," Rafa said, keeping her voice calm. "I want you to remember that you're not alone in this, that there are people who care about you, who want to help." "Like you?" João challenged. "What can you possibly do about this, Rafa? This isn't like nursing a sick cow back to health. This is real life." The harsh words stung, but Rafa refused to back down. "Yes, like me. And like Elena and Carlos and everyone else who cares about this place. About you." João's anger seemed to deflate, leaving only exhaustion. "I'm sorry," he said, sinking back into his chair. "I didn't mean that. I can't lose this place. It's all I have left of them." Rafa moved around the desk, kneeling beside his chair. "It's not all you have, João. You have yourself. You have a community that respects you, and you have me if you want me." João looked at her, the walls he'd rebuilt beginning to crumble again. "I do want you, Rafa, more than I've ever wanted anything, and that scares me too." Rafa took his hand. "Being scared is okay. Pushing away the people who care about you isn't." João pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I don't deserve you," he whispered into her hair. "Yes, you do," Rafa said firmly. "We both deserve happiness, João. Remember?" That night, João finally left his office to have dinner with the workers. He apologized for his absence and explained the situation with the bank. To his surprise, instead of panic or resignation, he was met with determination. "We'll work extra hours," Carlos offered, "no overtime pay. I can sell some of my jams at the market," Elena added. "My sister has been asking for the recipe for years." One by one, the workers offered what they could: savings, labor, ideas for raising money. João was overwhelmed by their loyalty. "See?" Rafa said quietly when they were alone later. "You're not alone." In the days that followed, the entire farm rallied around João. They organized an emergency sale at the market, offering special prices for bulk orders. Elena's jam sold out within hours. The workers pooled their savings, insisting João accept it as a loan. Still, it wasn't enough. The day before the deadline, João finally signed the papers, selling part of the farm to his cousin. The money, combined with everything else they had raised, would be just enough to pay off the bank. That evening, João found Rafa sitting on the porch swing of her cabin, watching the sunset. He sat beside her, the weight of the day evident in his slumped shoulders. "It's done," he said. "I meet with the bank tomorrow to pay everything off." Rafa squeezed his hand. "You saved the farm." "Most of it," João corrected. "I lost my father's favorite fishing spot and the meadow where he proposed to my mother. But you kept the heart of it," Rafa reminded him. "And land can be bought back someday." João nodded, then reached into his pocket. "I found something today while I was going through the old deed papers." He handed her a small, worn photograph. "It's my parents on their wedding day. They're standing in front of the cottage I showed you." Rafa looked at the photo. A young couple, radiantly happy, standing hand in hand before the cottage that now stood in ruins. "They look so in love." "They were," João said softly, "until the day they died." He took back the photo, looking at it with a sad smile. "My father told me once that the secret to their happiness was simple. They took care of each other. When one was weak, the other was strong." He put the photo away and turned to face Rafa fully. "These past weeks, you've been my strength when I had none left. You reminded me what matters, what my parents would have wanted for me." Rafa felt tears prick her eyes. "And what's that?" "Not just to survive," João said, taking her hands in his, "but to live, to love, to find joy again." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Rafaela Mendes, and it doesn't scare me anymore." Rafa's heart swelled, but before she could respond, a car honked from the driveway. They both turned to see Elena waving frantically from the porch of the main house. "Rafa!" she called. "There's a phone call for you. They say it's urgent." "João." And Rafa exchanged puzzled looks. No one ever called Rafa at the farm. They walked quickly to the house, where Elena handed Rafa the phone with a worried expression. "Hello?" Rafa said. A woman's voice responded, formal and unfamiliar. "Is this Rafaela Mendes? This is Dr. Larissa Santos from São Paulo Veterinary School. I'm calling about your scholarship application." Rafa's breath caught. "My what?" "Your application," the woman repeated. "You applied last year, but we had already filled our slots. A position has just opened up for our special advanced program, and your application was next on our list. We'd like to offer you a full scholarship starting next month." Rafa felt the room spin. She had applied to vet school over a year ago, before meeting David, before her life had fallen apart. It had been her dream since childhood, but the tuition had been far beyond her means. "Ms. Mendes," the woman prompted, "are you still there?" "Yes," Rafa managed. "I'm just surprised." "I understand it's sudden," Dr. Santos said. "We need your answer by the end of the week. The semester begins in 3 weeks. Rafa looked at João, who was watching her with concern. "Can I call you back tomorrow? I need to think about it." After getting the doctor's number and hanging up, Rafa turned to João, her mind reeling. "What is it?" he asked. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Rafa said slowly. "It's vet school in São Paulo. They're offering me a full scholarship." João's face went blank, masking whatever emotion had flashed in his eyes. "Vet school? You never mentioned that." "I applied over a year ago," Rafa explained, "before everything. I never thought I'd get in." João was silent for a long moment. Then he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's wonderful, Rafa. It's clearly what you were meant to do. The way you are with animals." Rafa felt torn in two. Vet school had been her dream for as long as she could remember, but now there was João and the farm and a life she had started to build here. I don't know what to do, she admitted. Joanne's expression softened. Yes, you do. This is your chance, Rafa, your future. But what about us? Rafa asked, her voice small. What about what you just said? Joanne took her hands, his touch gentle but somehow final. I meant every word. And because I meant it, I won't ask you to stay. I won't be the reason you give up your dream. Joanne, Rafa began, but he placed a finger over her lips. Think about it, he said. Not just about me or us. Think about what you want for your life. With that, he walked away, leaving Rafa standing in the kitchen, the phone still warm in her hand, her heart pulled in opposite directions. Rafa barely slept that night. She sat on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the small business card Dr. Santos had asked Elena to write her number on. A full scholarship to veterinary school, the opportunity she had dreamed of since she was a little girl, helping her grandfather with his animals. But now there was Joanne, and the farm, and a life she had never expected to find. Morning came with no clarity. Rafa went through her chores mechanically, her mind still churning with indecision. She hadn't seen Joanne since their conversation the previous evening. Eleanor said he had left before dawn to meet with the bank. Are you going to take it? Eleanor asked as they prepared lunch together. The scholarship, Rafa sighed. I don't know, it was my dream for so long, but now there's Joanne, Eleanor finished for her. Not just Joanne, Rafa admitted. It's this place, the work, the animals, all of you. I came here looking for escape, but I found something else instead. Eleanor patted her hand. Home. You found home. The word resonated deep within Rafa. Yes, Fazenda Bella-Terra had become home in a way no place had felt since her grandparents' small farm when she was a child. But veterinary school, Eleanor continued, that's a calling. And from what I've seen, it's yours. Before Rafa could respond, they heard the sound of Joanne's truck pulling into the driveway. Elena peered out the window. He's back from the bank, she said, and he's smiling. That must be good news. Joanne burst into the kitchen, his face more relaxed than it had been in weeks. It's done, he announced. The loans are paid off. The farm is safe. Elena clapped her hands together. Thanks be to God, I'll tell the others. She hurried outside, leaving Rafa and Joanne alone. For a moment, neither spoke. The tension from the previous night still hung between them, unresolved. I'm glad, Rafa said finally. About the farm, Joanne nodded. It wouldn't have happened without you, without the market, without your ideas. It was a team effort, Rafa corrected. Everyone helped. Joanne moved closer, his eyes searching her face. Have you decided about the scholarship? Rafa shook her head. Not yet. I have until the end of the week. What's holding you back? Joanne asked, though his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. You know what's holding me back, Rafa said softly. Joanne took her hands in his. Rafa, I meant what I said last night. I won't ask you to stay. Not when this opportunity could give you everything you've ever wanted. What if what I want has changed? Rafa challenged. Joanne's expression softened. Has it, really? Or are you just afraid to reach for your dream again? The question hit Rafa hard. Was he right? Was she using their relationship as an excuse to play it safe? I don't know, she admitted. Everything's happening so fast. Joanne nodded. Then take some time. Think about it away from here, away from me. What do you mean? Go to Sao Paulo, Joanne suggested. Visit the school. See what you'd be giving up if you stayed here. Then you'll know. The idea made sense, but the thought of leaving, even temporarily, made Rafa's chest tighten. Will you come with me? Joanne shook his head. This is a decision you need to make for yourself, without my influence. The next morning, Rafa found herself on a bus to Sao Paulo, a small overnight bag at her feet, and Joanne's words echoing in her mind. He had driven her to the bus station, their goodbye awkward and restrained. Neither wanted to make promises they might not be able to keep. Call when you get there, was all he said before she boarded. The city was just as Rafa remembered, busy, noisy, full of energy. It felt strange after months of rural quiet. She checked into a small hotel near the veterinary school and called Dr. Santos, who arranged to meet her that afternoon. São Paulo Veterinary School was impressive. Modern buildings, state-of-the-art, facilities and students hurrying between classes with purposeful expressions. Dr. Santos, a tall woman with kind eyes and grey-streaked hair, greeted Rafa warmly. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "Your application was one of the strongest we received last year. Your experience with large animals will be particularly valuable." Rafa felt a flutter of excitement as Dr. Santos showed her around. The lecture, halls, laboratories, treatment rooms, and small animal hospital. This was everything she had once dreamed of. "And this," Dr. Santos said proudly, opening a door to a large room filled with equipment, "is our new large animal surgical facility. Only 3 schools in the country have anything like it." Rafa ran her hand along a stainless steel examination table. "It's amazing. You could learn to save animals like your cow," Dr. Santos said. Rafa looked up in surprise. "How did you know about Estrella?" Dr. Santos smiled. "I called the farm to find you. The woman who answered, Elena, she told me what a miracle worker you were with animals. Said you nursed a cow back from the brink of death." "That was just instinct," Rafa said, "and João's knowledge." "Instinct is important," Dr. Santos agreed, "but combined with proper training, you could help thousands of animals over your career." The thought was overwhelming. Thousands of animals versus the handful at Fazenda Belterra. It seemed like such a clear choice when framed that way. They continued the tour, ending in Dr. Santos's office, where they discussed the scholarship details, housing options and course requirements. By the time Rafa left, her head was spinning with possibilities. She wandered the city streets, trying to imagine herself living here again. The scholarship would cover tuition and books, but living expenses would be tight. She'd need a part-time job. The program would be intense, 4 years of rigorous study, but at the end she would be Dr. Rafaela Mendes, veterinarian. The thought sent a thrill through her. That evening she called João as promised. He answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting by the phone. "How is it?" he asked after they exchanged greetings. "It's amazing," Rafa admitted. "The facilities, the professors, everything." "I knew it would be," João said, his voice warm despite the static on the line. "It sounds perfect for you." Rafa felt a lump form in her throat. "João, You don't have to say anything yet," he interrupted. "Take your time. See the city. Remember what urban life is like." After they hung up, Rafa tried to do just that. She visited her old neighborhood, had coffee at her favorite cafe, and even ran into a former co-worker who was delighted to see her. But everything felt different now. The city that had once been her home now felt foreign. The noise grated on her nerves. The crowds made her anxious. She missed the open sky, the smell of earth, the rhythm of farm life, and she missed João. His quiet strength, his rare but wonderful smile, the way he looked at her as if she were something precious. On her second day in São Paulo, Rafa met with 2 current veterinary students, both on scholarships like the one she'd been offered. They were enthusiastic about the program but honest about its challenges. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done," admitted Lucia, a serious young woman in her 3rd year, "but so worth it. Last week I helped deliver a litter of puppies, saving those lives. There's nothing like it." "Do either of you work with large animals?" Rafa asked. Paulo, the other student, nodded. "I'm specializing in livestock. There's huge demand for large animal vets, especially in rural areas." "Like where you're from," Lucia added. "Elena mentioned you're working on a farm." Rafa nodded. "Fazenda Belterra. It's a dairy farm mainly with some crops." "Perfect background," Paulo said. "You could go back there after graduation, set up a practice serving all the farms in the region. Most rural areas are desperate for qualified vets." The idea struck Rafa like lightning. She could have both, veterinary training and Fazenda Belterra. Not right away, but eventually. She could return to João with more to offer than just her instincts and willingness to learn, if he would wait for her. That night, sleep eluded her again. She sat by the hotel window, looking out at the city lights, turning her options over and over in her mind. The next morning, she met with Dr. Santos. "One last time. Have you made your decision?" the professor asked. "I have some questions first," Rafa said. "If I accept the scholarship, would I be able to return to my region after graduation? To set up a practice there? Dr. Santos nodded. Absolutely. In fact, we have a rural placement program that could help you establish yourself. The government offers incentives for veterinarians who serve agricultural communities. And what if, Rafa hesitated, what if I wanted to defer for 1 year? Would the scholarship still be available? Dr. Santos frowned. Defer? That's unusual. May I ask why? Rafa took a deep breath. There are things I need to resolve first. Commitments I've made. People who depend on me. Understanding dawned in Dr. Santos's eyes. The farm owner? Elena mentioned you two were close. Rafa felt her cheeks warm. It's not just that. The farm just went through a financial crisis. They're still recovering. I promised to help with the farmers market, with expanding their business. Dr. Santos studied her for a long moment. The scholarship committee would need a formal request. I can't promise anything, but given your qualifications, they might consider it. Hope bloomed in Rafa's chest. How soon would they decide? Within 2 weeks, Dr. Santos said. But Rafaela, consider carefully. Opportunities like this don't come along often. I know, Rafa said. Believe me, I know. That afternoon, Rafa boarded the bus back to Fazenda Belterra, her mind clearer than it had been in days. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she had a plan, a way forward that might allow her to honor both her dreams and her heart. The farm came into view as the bus wound along the country road. Rafa felt a surge of emotion at the sight of the familiar fields and buildings. In just a few months, this place had become more home to her than anywhere she'd lived in years. No one was expecting her back so soon. She had told João she'd stay in the city for 3 days, but she couldn't wait any longer. She needed to see him, to tell him what she was thinking. She walked from the bus stop, her small bag slung over her shoulder. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, and the familiar farm smells, earth, animals, growing things, welcomed her back. As she approached the main house, she noticed unusual activity. Extra trucks in the driveway, workers carrying equipment she didn't recognize. Had João started some new project while she was away? Elena spotted her first, hurrying across the yard with a worried expression. Rafa, you're back early. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I finished my meeting sooner than I thought, Rafa explained. What's going on? What's all this equipment? Elena's face fell. You don't know. João didn't call you. A knot formed in Rafa's stomach. No, what? I haven't spoken to João since last night. Elena took her arm, leading her away from the workers. There was a fire in the dairy barn last night. An electrical problem. We lost part of the building and some equipment. Rafa gasped. The animals? All safe, thank God, Elena assured her. João got them out in time. He was working late and smelled the smoke. Where is he now? Rafa asked, scanning the property. At the hospital, Elena said quietly. Rafa felt the blood drain from her face. Hospital? Is he hurt? Smoke inhalation and some burns on his arms. Nothing life-threatening, Elena added quickly, seeing Rafa's expression. Carlos is with him. They're supposed to release him today. Without another word, Rafa turned and started running toward her cabin. She needed her car keys. Rafa, wait, Elena called after her. You don't even know which hospital. But Rafa was already inside her cabin, grabbing her keys from the table. She rushed back out, calling to Elena. Which one? County General, Elena replied. But Rafa, he wouldn't want you to see him like this. He was very clear. Rafa cut her off. I don't care what he wants right now. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Rafa's mind raced with worst-case scenarios, despite Elena's assurances. Why hadn't João called her? Was he trying to protect her from worry while she made her decision about school? At the hospital, she found Carlos in the waiting room, his clothes still smelling faintly of smoke. Rafa, he exclaimed, rising from his chair. What are you doing here? João said you were in São Paulo. I came back early, she explained. How is he? Carlos's expression softened. Stubborn as always. The doctor wanted to keep him another night, but João insisted on leaving today. They're discharging him now. What happened exactly? Rafa asked. Faulty wiring in the new section of the barn, Carlos explained. João was checking on Estrela's calf when he noticed the smoke. He got all the animals out, then went back for the breeding records. Carlos shook his head. That's when the roof beam fell. He was lucky to get out at all. A door opened and a nurse wheeled João into the waiting room. His arms were bandaged and an oxygen mask covered his face, but his eyes found Rafa's immediately, widening in surprise. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice raspy as he pulled the mask away. "You're supposed to be in São Paulo." Rafa rushed to his side, fighting back tears. "And you're supposed to call me when you end up in the hospital." João had the grace to look sheepish. "I didn't want to worry you." "Not while you were making your decision," the nurse interrupted them. "Mr. Brando needs rest. You can continue this conversation at home." The drive back to the farm was quiet. João sat in the passenger seat of Rafa's car, occasionally closing, his eyes against the pain he tried to hide. Carlos followed in João's truck. "The insurance will cover most of the damage," João said finally, breaking the silence. "We'll rebuild the barn better than before." "I don't care about the barn," Rafa said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "You could have died, João." João reached over, his bandaged hand covering hers. "But I didn't. I'm fine." "This time," Rafa said. "But what about next time? What if I had been in São Paulo when the call came that you—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Rafa," João said softly, "you can't make life decisions based on fear of what might happen." "Isn't that what you've been doing?" she challenged. "Since your parents died?" João was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he admitted finally, "and it's no way to live. I've realized that since meeting you." When they arrived at the farm, Rafa helped João to his bedroom despite his protests that he could manage alone. Elena had prepared the room, turning down the bed and setting a pitcher of water on the nightstand. "You need to rest," Rafa insisted, helping him sit on the bed. "Doctor's orders." João caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Stay, just for a while." Rafa hesitated, then sat beside him on the edge of the bed. "You scared me." João's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I'm sorry, I didn't think—" "That's right, you didn't think," Rafa said, but there was no real anger in her voice. "You didn't think about what it would mean to me if something happened to you." João looked at her, his eyes suddenly vulnerable. "What would it mean to you, Rafa?" Rafa felt tears fill her eyes. "It would break me," she whispered, "because somewhere between nursing a sick cow and selling vegetables at the market, I fell in love with you, João Brandão." João's breath caught. He reached up, wincing, slightly at the movement, to brush a tear from her cheek. "Say it again." "I love you," Rafa repeated, her voice stronger. "I think I have since that night in the barn during the storm when you asked if I could take care of you too." João pulled her closer, ignoring the pain from his burns. "I love you, Rafaela Mendes, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." Their lips met in a gentle kiss, both mindful of João's injuries but unwilling to wait another moment to express the feelings that had been building between them for months. When they broke apart, João pressed his forehead to hers. "But what? About veterinary school? Your dream?" Rafa took a deep breath. "I'm still going." João pulled back, his expression a mixture of confusion and pain. "Oh, but not right away," Rafa continued. "I've asked Dr. Santos about deferring for a year. She thinks the scholarship committee might approve it." Hope flickered in João's eyes. "A year," Rafa nodded. "A year to help you rebuild the barn. Year to establish the market business so it can continue without me. A year to make sure you'll be okay while I'm gone." "And after the year?" João asked. 4 years of school," Rafa said. "It won't be easy. But Paulo, one of the students I met, he says there's huge demand for large animal vets in rural areas. I could come back here after graduation, set up a practice, serve all the farms in the region." João's eyes widened as he understood. "You'd come back? To me?" "If you'll wait," Rafa said, suddenly uncertain. "I know it's a lot to ask. 5 years is a long time." João laughed, then winced at the pain in his chest. 5 years? Rafa, I would wait a lifetime for you." He kissed her again, sealing the promise between them. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The insurance adjuster came to assess the damage to the barn. Construction crews began clearing the debris, and João, despite his injuries, insisted on being involved in every decision. Rafa divided her time between caring for João, helping with the animals, and preparing her deferment request for the scholarship committee. Dr. Santos had sent the necessary forms, and Rafa worked on her letter explaining why the delay would ultimately make her a better veterinarian. One evening, a week after the fire, João found Rafa sitting on the porch swing of her cabin, papers spread across her lap. "Working. On your letter?" he asked, sitting beside her. His bandages were smaller now, covering only the worst of the burns. Rafa nodded. "It's harder than I thought putting it all into words." João picked up one of the drafts, scanning it quickly. "This is good, very professional." But it doesn't. "Capture everything," Rafa said. "How do I explain what this place means to me, what you mean to me?" João set the paper down. "Maybe you don't need to. Maybe you just need to explain what kind of veterinarian you want to be and how this experience will help you become that." Rafa considered his words. "You're right. It's not about us, it's about the work, about the animals." João smiled. "Now you sound like a doctor already." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I've been thinking," João said finally, "about the cottage I showed you." Rafa's heart skipped. "What about it?" "I still want to restore it," João said. "But not right away. I was thinking, maybe in 4 years. Have it ready for when you come back from school." The implication was clear. He wasn't just offering to wait for her. He was planning a future with her. "João Brando," Rafa said, turning to face him fully. "Are you asking me to move in with you after veterinary school?" João's smile was shy but certain. "Eventually, yes, but first I think we should probably get married." Rafa's breath caught. "Married?" João took her hand. "Not now, not tomorrow, but someday, when you're ready, when we're both ready." Tears filled Rafa's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "I think I'd like that someday." 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from the scholarship committee. Rafa's hands trembled as she opened it, João standing beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "Dear Ms. Mendez," she read aloud, "after careful consideration of your request, the committee has approved your deferment for 1 year. Your scholarship will be held for you until the fall semester of next year, provided you maintain contact with your faculty advisor and complete the preparatory reading list enclosed." Rafa looked up at João, her face radiant. They approved. "I have a year." João pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, despite the lingering pain from his burns. "A year to build something worth coming back to," he promised. That evening, the farm workers gathered for a celebration dinner. Elena had prepared all of Rafa's favorite dishes, and Carlos had brought out a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. "To Rafa," João said, raising his glass, "future veterinarian and savior of sick cows everywhere." Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. The mood was joyful, but Rafa noticed a touch of sadness in some eyes. They would miss her when she left, just as she would miss them. Later, as the party wound down, João led Rafa outside to the hill overlooking the farm, the same spot where his father had proposed to his mother. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "It's not what you think," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Not yet." Rafa opened the box to find a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a cow. She laughed, recognizing. "Tie it immediately as a miniature estrella, so you don't forget where it all began," João said as he fastened the necklace around her neck. "As if I could forget," Rafa said, touching the pendant gently. "This is where I found myself again. Where I found you." João pulled her close, his kiss tender but promising more. "And where you'll return, after you've chased your dream and become the amazing veterinarian I know you'll be." "It won't be easy," Rafa warned. "Long distance is hard. We'll both be busy. There will be days when we question everything." João nodded. "I know, but some things are worth fighting for." He tilted her chin up, making sure she was looking into his eyes. "You are worth fighting for, Rafaela Mendez. Past this, it's worth every challenge." As they stood together under the starlit sky, the farm spread out below them, Rafa felt a certainty she had never known before. The path ahead wouldn't be simple or straight, but it was right. She could have both, her dream of becoming a veterinarian and her love for João and Fazenda Bela Terra. The seasons would change, years would pass, but some things would remain constant. Her love for animals, her connection to this land, and the man who had asked on a rainy night in a barn if she could take care of him too. The answer, now and always, was yes. The seasons changed at Fazenda Bella Terra. Summer faded into fall, and fall gave way to winter. The year that Rafa had been granted before veterinary school was passing quickly, too quickly. The dairy barn had been rebuilt, bigger and better than before. The farmer's market business had expanded, with regular customers now placing weekly orders. And João and Rafa had grown closer, their relationship deepening with each passing day. They had fallen into a comfortable routine. Mornings began with coffee on the porch of Rafa's cabin, planning the day ahead. Evenings often ended the same way, watching the sunset and sharing the small victories and challenges of farm life. João had kept his promise about the cottage. On weekends, they would walk to the meadow and work on clearing the overgrown garden, repairing the roof and making plans for the interior. It would be ready, João insisted, by the time Rafa returned from veterinary school. "I still can't believe you're doing this," Rafa said one Saturday as they took a break from working on the cottage. 4 years is a long time to wait. João handed her a glass of water, his eyes serious. "It's not waiting, Rafa, it's building a future worth coming home to." Those words became their mantra in the months that followed. On difficult days, when the distance looming between them felt overwhelming, one would remind the other, "We're not waiting, we're building." Spring brought new life to the farm. Calves were born, fields were planted, and flowers bloomed in the garden Elena had started behind the main house. With João's encouragement, Rafa began keeping detailed notes on animal care, creating her own reference guide that she could take to veterinary school. "You already think like a vet," João observed one evening as he watched her examine a cow with a swollen hoof. "The training will just give you the science behind what you already know instinctively." Rafa smiled at the compliment. "I hope so. Sometimes I wonder if I'm good enough for this program." João shook his head. "Don't do that. Don't doubt yourself. Dr. Santos saw what I see. Someone with extraordinary gifts who just needs the knowledge to match." As spring turned to summer, again Rafa received her official acceptance packet from the veterinary school. The start date was set, September 15th, just 2 months away. Reality began to sink in. Boxes appeared in Rafa's cabin as she sorted through her belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave behind. João helped her find an affordable apartment near campus, calling in a favor from an old college friend who lived in the city. "It's small," he warned after seeing photos, "but it's clean and safe, and the building allows pets." "Pets?" Rafa asked, surprised. "I wasn't planning on," João smiled mysteriously. "Just keeping our options open." A week later, she understood. João led her to the barn after dinner, telling her he had a surprise. Inside, in a pen lined with fresh straw, sat Estrella's now-grown calf, a beautiful heifer with a white star on her forehead, just like her mother. "Meet Lua," João said, using the Portuguese word for moon. "Estrella's daughter, your new companion." Rafa's eyes widened. "What? João, I can't take a cow to São Paulo." João laughed. "Not the cow, this." He reached into the pen and lifted out a small border collie puppy with black and white markings. Lua had been keeping him warm. "They've become friends?" Rafa took the squirming puppy into her arms, laughing as he licked her face. "He's perfect. But João, a puppy is a big responsibility, especially with my class schedule." "I know," João said. "But I thought, well, border collies are working dogs. She'll keep you company, but she'll also remind you of the farm, of what you're working toward." He paused. "Of us." Tears filled Rafa's eyes as she cuddled the puppy. "Does she have a name?" "Not yet," João said. "That's for you to decide." Rafa studied the puppy, taking in her intelligent eyes and the distinctive markings on her face. "Estrela had her star," she mused, "and now I have my own star to guide me." She smiled at João. "Guia. I'll call her Guia." "Guide," João translated, nodding approval. "Perfect." The puppy became Rafa's shadow in the weeks that followed, learning basic commands and getting used to a leash. João had arranged for all her vaccinations and even started crate training, insisting that a well-behaved dog would make Rafa's life in the city much easier. As the departure date grew closer, an unspoken tension grew between Rafa and João. They had discussed their plans endlessly, how often they would visit, their daily phone calls, the letters they would write. But the reality of separation loomed large. One evening, 2 weeks before Rafa was set to leave, João was unusually quiet during dinner. Afterward, instead of their usual walk, he asked Rafa to join him in his office. "Is something wrong?" she asked as he closed the door behind them. João shook his head, moving to his desk to retrieve a folder. "Not wrong, just important?" He handed her the folder, which contained legal documents. Rafa scanned them, confusion growing as she read. "João, this says I'm part owner of the farmer's market business." João nodded. 49%. I've kept controlling interest, but the profits will be split accordingly." Rafa stared at him. "But why? I didn't invest any money. The business was your idea." "It wouldn't exist without you," João said simply. "And this way, you'll have income while you're at school. Not much at first, but it should grow. Enough to cover extras beyond your scholarship." Rafa was speechless. The gesture was so unexpected, so generous. "João, I can't accept this." "You can, and you will," João insisted. "It's not charity, Rafa. It's recognition of your contribution. And," he hesitated, "it's security for both of us." Rafa understood then. This wasn't just about money. It was João's way of binding them together, of giving her a reason to stay connected to the farm. To him. "Thank you," she said finally, leaning up to kiss him. "For always thinking of me. Of us." The last days before. Her departure passed in a blur of preparations and goodbyes. Elena taught Rafa her secret recipes, insisting she shouldn't live on student food alone. Carlos gave her a detailed map of São Paulo, marking safe areas and dangerous ones with different colors. The other workers pooled their money to buy her a sturdy backpack for her books. And João tried to be strong, to focus on practical matters while avoiding the emotional weight of their coming separation. But Rafa saw through his facade, noticed the way his eyes followed her, how his hand sought hers whenever they were close. The night before she was to leave, João took Rafa to their hill overlooking the farm. A blanket was spread on the ground and a small picnic waited, wine, cheese, bread and fruits from their own orchards. "Our last sunset," Rafa said softly as they sat together, Guia curled at their feet. João shook his head. "No, just the last. One for a while. There will be thousands more, Rafa, I promise." They ate slowly, talking about everything except tomorrow. When the food was gone and the stars had emerged, João pulled Rafa into his arms, holding her as if he could somehow keep this moment forever. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "Another gift before you go." "João, you've given me so much already," Rafa protested. "The puppy, the business partnership." "This is different," João said. He opened his hand to reveal a small velvet box. Rafa's breath caught. "João, it's not an engagement ring," he clarified, quickly. "Not yet. That will come when the time is right, when you're ready." He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver ring set with a small emerald. "It's a promise ring, my mother's. My father gave it to her when they were young, before they were ready for marriage, but when they knew they wanted a future together." Tears filled Rafa's eyes as João slipped the ring onto her right hand. "It's beautiful, like the promise it represents," João said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise to wait for you, Rafa, to build this place into a home worthy of the amazing woman you are and the incredible doctor you'll become. And when you're ready, whether that's right after graduation or years later, I'll be here, loving you just as much as I do tonight." Rafa touched his face, memorizing every feature. "And I promise to come back to you, not just for visits but for good, to build a life here, with you." Their kiss sealed the promises, a bittersweet blend of love and imminent parting. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the weather itself refused to acknowledge the weight of the day. João loaded Rafa's suitcases into his truck, While she made one last check of her cabin, she paused at the door, looking at the small space that had been her home for the past year. So much had changed since she'd first arrived, broken and running from pain. Now she was leaving whole, running toward a future full of promise. Gia whined at her feet, sensing her emotions. Rafa bent to scratch the puppy's ears. "It's okay, girl, we're going on an adventure." The drive to the bus station was quiet. They had said everything that mattered the night before. Now there were only the practical details: bus schedules, phone numbers, the name of the person meeting her in São Paulo. At the station, João carried her bags to the waiting bus. The driver was already loading luggage, signaling that departure was imminent. "This is it," Rafa said, trying to keep her voice steady. João pulled her close, not caring who might see. 4 years, he whispered against her hair. "It sounds like forever, but it will pass. And then forever begins," Rafa finished, a phrase they had begun using in recent weeks. João kissed her one last time, a kiss that held all the promises they had made. "I love you, Rafaela Mendes. Go become the amazing veterinarian you were meant to be." "I love you too," Rafa said, tears finally spilling over. "Take care of yourself while I'm gone. No more heroics in burning buildings." "I promise," João said, with a small smile. "I have too much to live for now." The bus driver called for final boarding. Rafa picked up Guya's carrier and took a deep breath. With one last look at João, she boarded the bus, finding a window seat where she could see. As the bus pulled away, João stood tall, waving until they turned the corner and disappeared from sight. Only then did he allow his own tears to fall. 4 years later, the bus wound along the familiar country road, and Rafa pressed her face to the window, drinking in the sight of the rolling hills and green pastures of Fazenda Bela Terra. Beside her, Guya, now a full-grown, well-trained border collie, whined with excitement, recognizing the smells of home. "Almost there, girl," Rafa soothed, scratching behind the dog's ears. It had been a long 4 years, filled with challenges and triumphs. Veterinary school had been everything Dr. Santos promised: rigorous, exhausting, and deeply rewarding. Rafa had graduated with honors, specializing in large animal medicine, with additional certification in dairy herd health. The separation from João had been difficult, especially at first. They had maintained their connection through daily phone calls, weekend visits when possible, and long letters that arrived just when one of them needed encouragement most. Rafa had come home for holidays and semester breaks, and João had visited her in the city whenever the farm could spare him. Each reunion had been joyful, each parting a little easier with the knowledge that they were one step closer to their goal. Now that goal had been achieved. Dr. Rafaela Mendes was returning to Fazenda Bela Terra, not just for a visit, but for good. As the bus approached the stop nearest the farm, Rafa gathered her things. Most of her belongings would arrive later by delivery truck, but she had packed essentials for her first few days home. Home. The word filled her with warmth. After 4 years of dreaming about this moment, it was finally here. The bus stopped, and Rafa stepped down, Guya's leash in one hand and a small suitcase in the other. She had told João not to meet her. She wanted to walk the familiar road to savor each step of her return, but as she turned toward the farm, she saw a figure in the distance, standing beside a familiar truck. Even from here she would know. Him anywhere. João. Rafa broke into a run, Guya racing ahead of her. João opened his arms, catching her as she flew into his embrace, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "You weren't supposed to meet me," Rafa laughed, breathless from the run and from the joy of being in his arms again. "I couldn't wait another minute," João admitted, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. 4 years was long enough. He looked good, healthy, strong, his face more relaxed than she remembered. The lines around his eyes had deepened, but they were smile lines now, not marks of worry. "Look at you," João said, stepping back to take her in. "Dr. Mendes, I always knew you could do it." Rafa smiled, touching the nameplate on her jacket. "It still feels strange to hear that title." "You'll get used to it," João assured her. "Your patients are already lining up. Word has spread that Fazenda Bela Terra's Rafa is coming back as a real veterinarian. I've had calls from 5 neighboring farms this week alone." Rafa's eyes widened. "Really? Before I've even set up my practice?" João grinned. About that. I may have a surprise for you, but first, let's get you home. Everyone's waiting. The main house came into view, decorated with a banner that read, "Welcome home, Dr. Rafa." Elena, Carlos, and all the workers stood in the yard, applauding as Joane's truck approached. Tears filled Rafa's eyes at the warm welcome. Elena engulfed her in a tight hug, followed by Carlos and the others, everyone talking at once, asking about school, commenting on how well she looked, how proud they were. "Let her breathe," Joane laughed, putting an arm around Rafa's shoulders. "She just got here." Elena wiped tears from her eyes. "We've waited so long for this day. Come inside. I've prepared all your favorites." The kitchen table was laden with food, a welcome home feast. As they ate, Rafa shared stories from her final year of school, and the workers updated her on farm news. The farmers' market business had continued to grow, now supplying several restaurants in the city with organic produce and dairy products. "Your ideas laid the foundation," Joane told her. "The profit-sharing checks I sent barely reflect how much your work has meant to this farm." After the meal, while the others cleaned up, Joane took Rafa's hand. "Ready for your surprise?" Curious, Rafa followed him outside and into his truck. They drove toward the cottage, and Rafa felt a flutter of anticipation. She had seen photos of the renovation progress over the years, but Joane had been mysteriously silent about it in recent months. When they arrived, Rafa gasped. The once dilapidated cottage had been completely transformed. The exterior was painted a warm cream color with green shutters. Flowers bloomed in window boxes, and a stone path led to the front door. "Joane?" Rafa breathed. "It's beautiful. Wait until you see inside," Joane said, leading her up the path. He opened the door with a flourish, and Rafa stepped into what could only be described as her dream home. The main room was open and airy, with the original stone fireplace as its centerpiece. Comfortable furniture created a cozy living area, and the kitchen, though small, was equipped with modern appliances. "This is amazing," Rafa said, turning slowly to take it all in. "When did you finish it?" "Last month," Joane admitted. "I wanted it to be perfect for your return." Rafa explored the rest of the cottage, a small dining area, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub and 2 bedrooms, the larger one with a handmade quilt on the bed that she recognized as Elena's work. "It's everything I imagined," she told Joane, her heart full. "A real home." Joane smiled, but there was a nervousness about him now. "There's one more thing I want to show you." He led her back outside and around to the side of the cottage where a separate building stood, newer than the cottage but built in the same style. "What's this?" Rafa asked as Joane opened the door. Inside was a fully equipped veterinary examination room, an examination table, cabinets filled with supplies, a small laboratory area, and even an X-ray machine. "Your clinic," Joane said simply. "So you can see patients right here on the farm." Rafa was speechless, moving through the space in wonder. It was perfect, small but functional, with everything she would need to start her practice. "How did you afford all this?" she finally asked. Joane smiled. "The farm has done well these past few years, and I had some help. Dr. Santos advised on the equipment, and some of the neighboring farmers contributed when they heard what I was planning. They've been waiting for a local vet for years." Rafa turned to him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll move in," Joane suggested. "Say you'll build your practice here. Say—" He broke off, suddenly dropping to one knee. From his pocket, he pulled a small box. "Joane," Rafa whispered, her heart racing. "4 years ago, I gave you a promise," Joane said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Today, I want to make another one. Rafaela Mendez, Dr. Rafaela Mendez, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here, healing animals, growing our farm, maybe someday raising a family?" He opened the box to reveal a beautiful diamond ring, simple but elegant, exactly what Rafa would have chosen for herself. "You once found a sick cow and showed me that tenderness was still possible in a world that had taken so much from me," Joane continued. "You took care of that cow. Then you took care of me, even when it meant putting your own dreams on hold. Now you've achieved those dreams, and I'm asking if I can be part of what comes next." Tears streamed down Rafa's face as she pulled João to his feet. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with joy. Yes to all of it. The clinic, the cottage, the marriage, everything. João slipped the ring onto her finger, where it settled perfectly next to the promise ring she had worn for 4 years. Then he kissed her, a kiss that spoke of promises kept and new beginnings. Welcome home, Dr. Mendez, he whispered against her lips. It's good to be home, Rafa replied, knowing she was exactly where she belonged. In the years that followed, Fazenda. Bela Terra flourished. Rafa's veterinary practice grew to serve farms throughout the region, her reputation for skill and compassion spreading far beyond what she had imagined possible. João continued to expand the farm's operations, always with an eye towards sustainable practices and humane animal treatment. The farmers' market business became a model for other farms, proving that small-scale agriculture could be both profitable and ethical. They married in the meadow beside their cottage, with Elena, Carlos, and all the farm workers in attendance. Dr. Santos came from the city, bringing several of Rafa's classmates who had become friends over the years. The cottage grew lively with the addition of children, first a boy with João's serious eyes and Rafa's gentle smile, then a girl whose love for animals rivaled her mother's. Guia watched over them all, eventually joined by other dogs, cats, and a succession of patients that the children insisted needed special care at home. Through it all, Rafa and João remained each other's center, supporting dreams, sharing burdens, finding joy in the life they had built together. Each evening, they would sit on their porch watching the sunset over the land they both loved, marveling at how a sick cow and a rainy night had changed their lives forever. And whenever someone asked how they had found each other, João would smile and tell the story of a young woman who knelt in the mud to care for an animal everyone else had overlooked. She had that kind of tenderness, he would say, reaching for Rafa's hand. The kind that heals more than just what's broken on the outside. Rafa would squeeze his hand in return, remembering the question that had started it all. The vulnerable. Words of a man who had been alone too long. If you have that kind of tenderness, do you think you could take care of me too? The answer, every day for the rest of their lives, was yes. The end.